Final Vendetta vs Shredder's Revenge. Can Bitmap Bureau's 90s inspired beat 'em up take on the classic cartoon brawler? Well, let's find out. My name's... So Streets of Rage 4 has dominated the beat-em-up scene for the last few years, but that's all about to change with the release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge. And even now there's another contender. Just a few days later we have Final Vendetta. So in this show we're going to take a look at Final Vendetta and find out what makes it tick, and compare the two biggest beat-em-ups to be released in 2022. Both Final Vendetta and Shredder's Revenge share more than just their genre's namesake. Both games take inspiration from the 90s, not just with the universes they occupy, but with the art styles as well, harking back to the golden age of beat-em-up games with titles like Streets of Rage, Final Fight, Undercover Cops, Golden Axe, and so many more. So where do we start when comparing these two 90s inspired beat-em-ups? Well, maybe by acknowledging that they're both not equal. Shredder's Revenge leverages an insanely popular Turtles license, while Final Vendetta is original IP. It's also safe to say that Final Vendetta probably had a significantly smaller budget and team working on this compared to Shredder's Revenge. Key to any beat-em-up is its combat mechanics, and having played hundreds of them in my time and owning over 100 in my collection, I can tell you that there are quite a few that get this wrong. Over the last 30 years, the combat gameplay has evolved into two distinct styles. They have no official term, so we'll just call them old school and new school. New school beat-em-ups are all about building up your chain attack to maximise your score and gain other benefits. To do this, they introduce the ability to juggle your enemies in the air and chain attacks together. They make the edges of the screen collision volumes for when enemies are in mid-air so that they can bounce off them, and make move cancelling as reactive as possible, allowing players to switch between enemies and attacks with ease. This is where Shredder's Revenge sits, and it does a fantastic job of mastering the fundamental mechanics. Final Vendetta is an old school beat-em-up and throws itself into 90s gaming nostalgia. For the most part, Final Vendetta has mastered the combat mechanics of the classic titles it seems to emulate. The punching and kicking really has weight to it and feels like it connects with the enemy NPCs. Both sound and animation have been perfectly implemented to create a core mechanic of this beat-em-up. It includes all the moves you'd expect: jump, jump kick, flying kick, dash, dash attack, standard punching, energy reducing specials, non-energy reducing specials, grapple attacks, stomps and reverse attacks. Everything you need to dispatch enemies is here and play out beautifully with some lovely animation. But despite covering all the bases when it comes to the moves, there is a fluidity that's missing that games like Streets of Rage 3 mastered 25 years ago. The first issue I found with the combat is the ability to change your attack priority between your left and right flank. The best beat-em-ups of the 90s allowed you to get overwhelmed by enemies but switch your attacks from left to right seamlessly, turning around the most dire of situations. Final Vendetta struggles a lot here. I often found myself waiting to stun an enemy with a punch and then switch directions to take on another, but found myself almost glued to the first enemy I attacked. The attack animations need to play out before you can change direction to fight another enemy, and so what happens more often than not is that you'll need to get hit from another side in order to cancel the attack, allowing you then to change direction. You can of course use your special move. This controls the space on both left and right, but it will reduce your health. You can also build up a special bar that when full allows you to use your special move without losing health. But both of these solutions have too much risk in them to be considered a constant way to deal with threats from both sides. There's also a backwards attack, but for some bizarre reason this is a 2-button press and not the most convenient 2 buttons either. You need to press X and Y or triangle and square, which is really awkward, and control mapping in the options doesn't give you the option to put this on a more useful button, like the right trigger or shoulder buttons. You also have a second special that you can use by pressing X and A or triangle and circle, which gives you a powerful move that allows you to control space in one direction. And so this game is at its most enjoyable when combat is mono-directional. In order to deal with large number of enemies, I found myself resorting to dashing up or dashing down to escape the punch bag trap. Shredder's Revenge, on the other hand, has design managing combat space at its core, and is one of the real benefits of new school beat-em-ups, as combat feels fluid. But it's not exclusive to new school games, as games like Streets of Rage demonstrated all those years ago. The other area of combat that's a little lackluster is in the weapons. Now, weapons have always been designed to be a boost that periodically pop up, providing a peak of excitement to the combat for a short period of time. In Final Vendetta, I ended up trying to avoid weapons, as the animation speed was so slow for them to be effective. You will find yourself being punched in the face repeatedly as you try to swing your sword, and so instead of being an injection of excitement, they felt more like a penalty or a hindrance. The rest of the combat and gameplay though play out like the classic beat-em-ups you remember. Smash crates and barrels for food and jewels, move from left to right taking down crime syndicates, have off-screen scuffs with enemies and face down the end-of-level boss. Despite some of the shortcomings in the combat fluidity, the core beat-em-up elements are a lot of fun and are authentic to the games we had in the 90s, and feels just as timeless. The game has a total of 6 levels for you to play through, with levels being relatively short. You can unlock new game modes like Survival and Boss Rush, but you'll need to finish the game with certain characters to get these. There's also a training mode that's locked, and you'll need to complete the game to get this. Although, if I finish the game, why do I need to train? 2-player mode is a lot of fun and solves the issues of controlling space on both sides of the screen. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that this game shines best with 2 players. You can also face off against each other in versus mode. But outside of these extra game modes, there's not a lot more to keep you coming back to the game. This is where you get a lot of added value from Shredder's Revenge. With the additional metagame they wrap around the core arcade game, things like special requests, character leveling, and unlocks keep you coming back for more. Whereas Final Vendetta is an out-and-out arcade game. As I said, the game supports the classic 2-player setup, whereas Shredder's Revenge is an astonishing 6 players, which I still want to experience. Visually, both Shredder's Revenge and Final Vendetta have chosen to go with a pixel art style, but both have taken a very different direction when it comes to execution. Shredder's Revenge has small sprites and a more zoomed out camera. Final Vendetta has a closer camera and larger sprites. Because of its smaller sprites and more distant camera, Shredder's Revenge often has more going on and more action. That's not to say though that Final Vendetta is not detailed or action-packed. It has some beautiful artwork, great background and foregrounds. The game's huge sprites remind me of Neo Geo arcade games, and the detail in the pixel art is breathtaking at times. The pixel art has nice broad strokes of colour, rather than intricately drawn detail that gives Final Vendetta a unique style. There are also some nice touches to the artwork of the world that create this kind of London-New York medley of a universe. It feels like a distinctly US fantasy city, but every now and then you get some of that UK quirkiness break through, like cricket bats rather than baseball bats, the London Tube, red phone boxes, Tower Bridge, Utah Saints poster, and a TVR. The animation also feels stunning with tons of NPC special animations, from idols to boss introductions. Your characters have an awesome array of animations, with attacks feeling snappy with plenty of motion across the body. The only animations that look a little out of place were the walk cycles for the player characters. They're a little robotic compared to all the other animations in the game. Character design is nice and very reminiscent of 90s beat-em-ups. I'd say NPC and player characters struck me as being all teenagers. The character design is somewhere in between Scott Pilgrim and Final Fight. It's not a bad thing, just an observation. The same goes for Shredder's Revenge approach. They also have a younger, lighter style of character design compared to the games they draw inspiration from. If graphics are a virtual stalemate between these two games, then audio is where Final Vendetta lifts its head above Shredder's Revenge. Shredder's Revenge has a decent soundtrack and some great sound design. It's just that it's what I would expect from a Turtles game. It's not a bad thing, it's just what I expected. There's no surprises. Final Vendetta, on the other hand, has created a love letter to the 90s, with some more modern interpretations of the era. As Stranger Things uses their soundtrack to waft nostalgia under your nose and take you back to the 80s, so does Final Vendetta with a perfectly crafted original soundtrack. I only wish I had the collector's edition so that I could pop the soundtrack into my Mega CD. The sound effects in both games are well implemented, and I can't find fault in either game. They are impactful and add real weight to the actions they're attributed to. Getting the sound effect right for an impact is vital to a beat-em-up success, and Final Vendetta has nailed it with some lovely impact sounds.
We'll be on them like pepperoni on pizza.
So what's the verdict for these two games that have so much in common but at the same time are very different games? Well, both games offer very different experiences. Shredder's Revenge adopts this new school style of beat 'em up. It's well-rounded, has a lot of extra content in there, and is more likely to appeal to broader gaming audiences. However, Final Vendetta offers an authentic slice of 90s beat 'em up action, with great graphics, stunning audio, and solid gameplay. This game also is a real challenge, and will keep the most hardened of beat 'em up fans busy for hours. It's no cakewalk, and if you like that kind of thing, then Final Vendetta is for you.
Duke Sancho jumps into action.
Let's go!
And he's pissed.
Take this!
Meet Claire Sparks. She kicks ass. Miller T. Williams drops in. Battle across 4 unique game modes. One last fight. Final Vendetta!
So that's it for this week's show. 2 brand new beat 'em up games. I love my beat 'em up games. And the best thing is that they are steeped in 90s nostalgia. Really go after that retro gaming feel to them. Now, if you enjoy videos like this, if you love retro gaming, if you love new games for old consoles, then why not consider subscribing? You can do this by clicking on a little button just below this video. We put out brand new retro gaming content every single Monday. And if you don't want to miss that, you can also click on a little bell just below this video. Now, if you can't wait until Monday, don't worry, because we got a huge back catalogue of retro gaming videos for you to enjoy, 2 of which you can watch over here.